In the turbulent 1930s, when the world's great powers vied for technological supremacy and ideological dominance, the Soviet Union took to the skies with a colossal steel bird that stunned all who saw it. This machine, the Tupolev ANT-20, stood as a testament to the ambitious Soviet spirit, forging a path into the unknown and commanding global attention. Known as the Maxim Gorky, it soared not merely as an airplane, but as a flying stage for an idea, an instrument of influence, and a marvel of engineering. Its size, purpose, and ultimate fate cemented its place among aviation's most extraordinary legends. In the early 1930s, the Soviet Union sought ways to demonstrate its emerging might. The Bolshevik Revolution had reshaped the nation, but the political and cultural revolutions needed potent symbols to inspire a population that was still healing from conflict and rapid change. These were years when industrial achievements were seen as milestones toward a radiant future, and the skies beckoned as the ultimate frontier. Into this context stepped the Tupolev Design Bureau, led by brilliant engineer Tupolev, who understood that craft was more than just machines. They could serve as flying ambassadors of a new order. The ambition behind what would become the Tupolev ANT-20, later christened the Maxim Gorky, was to create an aerial colossus unlike anything the world had ever seen. This aircraft was intended to represent the Soviet Union's engineering prowess, cultural ascendancy, and unshakable belief in a socialist future. The concept demanded an airplane not just large, but elegantly balanced, both technically impeccable and symbolically charged. Its scale would rival that of commercial airliners yet to come. Yet its primary mission was not for ferrying passengers for profit, but transporting the grand narrative of the Soviet state. The design team began by envisioning an aircraft with a massive wingspan that would dwarf contemporary designs. Power would come from multiple engines arranged in pairs along the wing's leading edge, providing both lift and a sense of fearless daring. Structural innovations were required to achieve the necessary rigidity and strengthen the airframe, using new alloys and advanced engineering techniques. The fuselage had to be immense, a tubular cathedral of steel beams and duralumin plates, strong enough to handle the strain of long flights and the weight of heavy equipment. Yet the vision extended beyond mere mechanical feats. The ANT-20 would be equipped with facilities unheard of in an airplane at the time: a radio broadcasting studio, a printing press to produce newspapers in flight, a fully functioning library, and even a small film projector. The cabin would host writers, journalists, artists, and propagandists, all dedicated to spreading the message of a rising Soviet era. This flying platform would carry the essence of Soviet progress into villages, towns, and cities, dropping leaflets, transmitting messages, and dazzling onlookers with displays of technological confidence. No other nation had dreamed so boldly. The Soviets understood that. To shape minds, they had to control the narrative, and to control the narrative, they must captivate the imagination. The ANT-20's designers believed that engineering marvels could transcend borders, impress rivals, and rally allies. In newspapers and magazines of the period, bold headlines proclaimed the new airplane's imminent arrival. Sketches showed a colossal silhouette, its 8 engines humming in unison, a steel whale swimming through invisible currents of air. By the time the design was nearing completion, the ANT-20 had become more than just a blueprint. It had become a symbol of faith in Soviet ingenuity. It promised to harmonize mechanical complexity with ideological purpose. It would be the world's largest airplane, an object of awe and curiosity. Ultimately, the ANT-20 was the fruit of a singular vision: to fuse form and function into a spectacle that would declare, with every roaring engine and gleaming rivet, that the Soviet Union was a force to be reckoned with on the global stage. The Tupolev ANT-20 emerged from the drawing boards at a time when aviation technology was still wrestling with its infancy. Many nations were struggling to master the fundamentals of powered flight. The Soviets, on the other hand, wanted to push the envelope and redefine what was possible. The ANT-20 stood as a testament to these ambitions, incorporating advanced materials, engineering techniques, and onboard amenities that had scarcely been imagined, let alone realized, in a flying machine. At its core, the ANT-20 was a structural marvel, built largely from duralumin, a lightweight aluminum alloy pioneered in the early 20th century. It managed to balance immense size with relative efficiency. The challenge lay in ensuring that its immense wings, spanning over 200 feet, could not only carry the weight of the 8 powerful engines, but also the internal infrastructure that transformed the aircraft into a flying communications hub. These structural challenges called for rigorous testing and innovative stress distribution methods. Engineers painstakingly calculated load paths, reinforcing critical joints, and then using cutting-edge metallurgy to ensure that the enormous airframe would remain stable in turbulent conditions. Powering this giant were 8 McEwen M34 engines, arranged in 4 tandem pairs along the thick wings. Such an arrangement was unconventional, but it reflected the necessity to generate sufficient thrust for takeoff and maintain a reasonable cruising speed. These engines, known for their reliability in Soviet bombers and and large transports required careful synchronization to ensure balanced propulsion. Each pair had to harmonize closely, their propellers beating through the air with rhythmic precision. The ANT-20's engineering team faced the delicate task of ensuring that engine vibrations, torque, and airflow disturbances didn't compromise the aircraft's structural integrity or the comfort of those aboard. Inside the fuselage, the ANT-20 broke new ground. Rather than a simple cargo hold or passenger seating, it hosted a suite of specialized rooms and facilities. A printing press allowed the crew to produce newspapers mid-flight, ensuring the spread of the Soviet message in real time. Mobile radio stations transmitted propaganda broadcasts to listeners on the ground, making the aircraft an airborne megaphone for the state's narrative. In an era before mass communication satellites or television networks, this capability was revolutionary. It turned the airplane into a communication platform that bridged distances and brought messages to far-flung populations. Beyond communications, though, the ANT-20 integrated photographic equipment and darkrooms, permitting the capture and development of images from the sky. Photographers could chronicle the journey, capturing aerial views of Soviet landscapes, industrial sites, and parades below. There was even space for cultural activities. A small library and film projection equipment transformed the plane into a traveling cultural center, delivering curated Soviet art and cinema to remote regions. Each of these functions required careful integration of electrical wiring, ventilation, and structural modifications. The complexity of these onboard systems demanded a new kind of collaboration between engineers, technicians, and operators. The navigation and control systems, too, represented significant technological steps forward. Multiple pilots, navigators, and radio operators all worked together to manage the airplane's flight path, monitor engine performance, and maintain communication with ground stations. The cockpit layout, though rudimentary by today's standards, was advanced for the time, with instrumentation carefully arranged to monitor the giant's vital signs. All of these elements had to function harmoniously, creating a safe and sustainable environment inside what could otherwise be a cavernous and chaotic space. In essence, the ANT-20's technological achievements were not just isolated breakthroughs, but a cohesive whole. Every engine mount, every structural beam, every wire, microphone, and printing press contributed to the overall mission. This was a machine built not simply to move people and cargo, but to convey ideas. By blending cutting-edge aeronautical engineering with media production capabilities, the ANT-20 heralded a new era in which aircraft could serve as platforms for narrative as well as transportation. The first time the Tupolev ANT rose into the air, it did so with the weight of enormous expectations. Months of design, construction, and refinement had yielded a machine that dwarfed its predecessors. Engineers held their breath as the 8 engines spooled up, turning propellers that seemed almost absurdly large. The roar echoed across the test field, and onlookers braced themselves for the moment of truth. Would the behemoth actually fly? In the spring of 1934, test pilots took the ANT-20 on its maiden flight. Lifting the world's largest airplane off the ground was a delicate ballet of both thrust and lift. As the runway rushed beneath the giant wheels, the wing's carefully designed aerofoil surfaces began to generate the necessary upward force. Slowly, like a giant bird testing unfamiliar wings, the ANT-20's nose rose. Moments later, it was airborne, climbing steadily into the sky. Those who witnessed the event spoke of relief and disbelief in equal measure. The airplane proved stable, surprisingly responsive for its size, and demonstrated that the design team's confidence had not been misplaced. Subsequent test flights allowed pilots and engineers to refine handling characteristics. This was no ordinary aircraft. It required a larger flight crew than most bombers of the era. Pilots coordinated with navigators, radio operators, flight engineers, and other specialists to manage the complex tasks of keeping 8 engines synchronized and ensuring a steady course through the heavens. Engine performance, fuel consumption, and structural loads were measured and then remeasured. Problems were identified, solutions were proposed, and the airplane's capabilities were incrementally enhanced. Gradually, as confidence grew, the ANT-20 began more public flights. The Soviets wanted to show their triumph to the world, and so the massive aircraft was flown over Moscow to an astonished public. Its silhouette, unmistakable and commanding, became an icon that journalists rushed to describe. Photographs from these early flights show crowds craning their necks, hands shading their eyes, gazing upward at something that seemed almost mythical. The ANT-20, it didn't just fly. It hovered in the public imagination as proof that the Soviet Union was forging forging ahead in realms that others not dared tread. Engineers continued to tweak small details as flight hours accumulated. They studied vibrations through the airframe, monitored stresses of the landing gear, and fine-tuned cockpit instrumentation. Each flight was a lesson, an opportunity to understand how best to guide this immense mass of metal through shifting air currents and weather conditions. Over time, pilots learned to handle the ANT-20's unique personality. They understood its tendencies during takeoffs, its preferences during steep turns, and the best methods to maintain stable flight over long distances. These first flights attracted international interest. Aviation enthusiasts and foreign correspondents wrote breathless accounts, some skeptical, others admiring. Could this machine be the vanguard of a new era in aviation, a precursor to transcontinental airliners and aerial cargo leviathans? Or was it a propaganda stunt, a Soviet showpiece meant more for spectacle than practical utility? For the Soviet leadership, these questions mattered less than the simple fact that the airplane worked. By demonstrating the ANT-20's ability to take to the skies and return safely, they proved their capacity to realize grand visions. It was a confidence-building exercise at a time when the nation was still solidifying its industrial capabilities. It showed that the Soviets could harness science and engineering to achieve astonishing feats. In the end, those first flights established the ANT-20 as more than just a blueprint realized. The airplane was alive, moving, breathing through its engines, and fulfilling the promise encoded in every rivet and bolt. Its successful debut paved the way for the missions that would follow, when the massive airplane would become not just a technological marvel, but a powerful tool of persuasion and spectacle. From the moment of its conception, the Tupolev ANT-20 was destined to be more than just an experiment in aeronautics. It was built to serve as a stage, a platform from which the Soviet narrative could be projected outward. Once the initial test flights had proven its capabilities, the aircraft's true purpose began to unfold. The ANT-20 took to the skies not only as a mechanical wonder, but as a mobile broadcasting station, printing press, and cultural exhibition hall soaring above towns, skies, and the countryside. On its propaganda missions, the ANT-20 became a visual and auditory sensation. Imagine living in a remote Soviet village, largely cut off from the hum of city life. Suddenly, you hear the distant drone of engines, and then you look upward and you see an enormous shape slicing through the clouds. As it passes overhead, leaflets drift from its belly, fluttering to the ground like confetti. These leaflets might announce socialist reforms, celebrate the achievement of the 5-year plans, or call for unity against the looming threats outside Soviet borders. The aircraft's presence was both awe-inspiring and instructive, reminding citizens that they were part of a grand socialist experiment. In addition to leaflets, the ANT-20 employed its onboard radio to broadcast speeches, music, and news bulletins. For many listeners on the ground, these broadcasts were a form of theater in the sky, delivered by unseen actors riding an airborne platform. This was propaganda in its purest form, immediate, thrilling, and undeniably modern. The Soviets believed that technology, especially something as impressive as an aerial colossus like this, could help unify the diverse peoples within the Union's vast frontiers under a shared narrative. But the ANT-20 was more than just a loudspeaker and a newspaper plant. It carried photographers who documented the world below, capturing images of factories, kolkhozes, and infrastructure projects. The airplane itself had become part of the story, featuring in photographs and newsreels that highlighted Soviet ingenuity. Reporters and writers aboard could produce their own material, printing it in flight and distributing it to areas otherwise difficult to reach. The mere concept that words typed and printed mid-air could rain down on distant fields was astonishing at the time. Cultural presentations were also a part of the mission. Short films, preserved on celluloid reels and projected within the cabin, could be introduced to passengers or visiting delegations. Although these cinematic efforts were largely for internal consumption aboard the aircraft, they did symbolize the multifaceted nature of the ANT-20's role. It wasn't just about telling people what to think, it was about immersing them in the mythos of Soviet progress. To the leadership, technology and media were inseparable tools for molding the public consciousness. The ANT-20's propaganda missions occurred during a period when the Soviet state sought to consolidate its power and claim its place on the global stage. By flying over various regions, industrial centers, agricultural areas, and border regions, it stitched together the narrative of a unified socialist homeland. Ordinary citizens, regardless of their education or background, were confronted by the undeniable presence of a machine that promised a future shaped by science, industry, and collective effort. And these missions did not go unnoticed abroad. Western observers found the concept both intriguing and unsettling. Some admired the audacity and scale of the Soviet project, while others saw it as a harbinger of totalitarian control exercised from the skies. The ANT-20 was, after all, not merely a demonstration of technological prowess, but an explicit statement of ideological intent. By placing media production capabilities inside the belly of an airplane, the Soviets had merged communication infrastructure with aviation, blending the physical and informational realms into a single soaring entity. The propaganda missions were the ANT-20's finest hour in terms of fulfilling its intended role. As it sailed above landscapes, young and old, urban and rural, it tied them all to a shared vision. It was a message in motion, a steel messenger whose appearance and capabilities could not easily be ignored. In these journeys through the sky, the ANT-20 became a rare and unforgettable presence, leaving in its wake a trail of printed words, broadcast voices, and ambitious dreams. On May 18th of 1935, tragedy struck in a moment that laid bare the risks and fragility of such ambitious undertakings. The Tupolev ANT-20 was on a demonstration flight over Moscow, meant to celebrate and inspire, when it met an untimely and shocking end. What began as a routine public display intended to highlight Soviet prowess and the machine's reliability ended in a catastrophic collision that sent the mighty aircraft plummeting to the ground, claiming many lives and shaking the confidence of a nation. That day, the ANT-20 had taken to the skies accompanied by other aircraft, smaller escorts there to frame the giant's majesty. Among these escorts was an experimental fighter plane that was piloted by a daring aviator who, according to several accounts, performed an unauthorized roll maneuver too close to the ANT-20. The fighter slammed into the wing of the larger aircraft, tearing through the structure and disabling critical control surfaces. In a heartbeat, the miracle machine was transformed into a wounded beast, no longer able to maintain steady flight. Witnesses on the ground described the unfolding horror. The ANT-20 struggled to remain aloft, with one of its wings compromised and critical control functions lost. It entered a fatal descent. The enormous fuselage, once a source of fascination and pride, became a heavy, uncontrollable mass hurtling toward Earth. The crash was violent and sudden, the massive airplane impacting the ground with destructive force. The resulting wreckage and fires left little hope for survivors. Dozens perished in the tragedy, including crew members, journalists, and guests on board. The shock reverberated through Moscow and beyond. The aftermath was marked by grief, confusion, and questions that demanded answers. The Soviet authorities swiftly investigated the cause of the collision and the subsequent crash. Blame fell heavily on the fighter pilot's ill-advised maneuver, and measures were proposed to prevent such incidents from ever happening again. Yep, the damage was done. The ANT-20, once a brilliant beacon of hope and potential, now lay in twisted metal and scorched fragments. Its fate served as a grim reminder that even the most visionary achievements could be undone by a single act of recklessness. The symbolic impact of the crash was profound. The ANT-20 had not merely been an airplane, it was a statement about Soviet ingenuity and the march toward a bright socialist future. Its destruction felt like a blow not just to aviation enthusiasts and engineering teams, but to those who had come to see it as a manifestation of national pride. In a world beyond the Soviet borders, skeptics and critics seized on the tragedy, saying it exemplified the dangers of combining grandiose ambition with hasty execution. But despite the sadness and dismay, the Soviet Union, in typical fashion, pressed forward. Engineers, designers, and pilots, they learned from the incident, integrating lessons about safety, pilot discipline, and aerial coordination into future projects. Aviation would continue to evolve. Indeed, a second ANT-20, known as the ANT-20 bis, would be constructed, albeit with modifications and improvements. Yet for many who had witnessed the original marvel take flight, the loss would never be forgotten. In that single tragic moment, the ANT-20's potential was cut short. Instead of decades of service, it would exist largely as a memory, a cautionary tale that underscored the perils inherent in giant leaps of faith. The Soviets had aimed for the heavens, and for a fleeting time, they succeeded in reaching them. The crash, however, reminded everyone that the human element, fallible, sometimes rash, is always subject to the laws of physics. It could bring even the grandest vision crashing down to Earth. The Tupolev ANT-20's legacy endures as a stirring emblem of ambition, innovation, and the fragile nature of grand achievements. Though tragedy claimed its form, its memory still inspires awe and reflection. It challenged norms, it redefined aviation's boundaries, and exemplified the powerful synergy of technology and ideology. The ANT-20 will forever remain a symbol of the Soviet Union's skyward dreams and the profound complexities of blending engineering triumphs with political purpose. In the annals of aviation history, the ANT-20 stands out not just for its sheer size, but for what it represented, a bold statement of what a nation can aspire to achieve when driven by vision and ideology. It pushed engineers to explore new frontiers in aeronautical design, influencing subsequent aircraft development both within the Soviet Union and internationally. The innovations pioneered in the ANT-20's construction, from its multi-engine configuration to its integrated communication systems, laid groundwork that would benefit future generations of aircraft designers. Culturally, the ANT-20 became a legend, a testament to a time when aviation was intertwined with national identity and propaganda. It embodied the spirit of an era where the sky was seen as a new domain for expressing power and unity. Stories of its flights, both triumphant and tragic, continue to captivate historians, aviation enthusiasts, and the general public alike, serving as a poignant reminder of the heights and depths that human endeavors can reach. Moreover, the ANT-20 story offers valuable lessons in the balance between ambition and safety, innovation and practicality. Its rise and fall illustrate the potential rewards of pushing technological boundaries, as well as the inherent risks involved in such grand ventures. As modern aviation continues to advance, the legacy of the ANT-20 encourages a reflection on the motivations behind our technological pursuits and the impacts they have on society. Ultimately, the Tupolev ANT-20 remains a powerful symbol of human aspiration and the enduring quest to soar beyond the known. It reminds us that while machines can be built to achieve incredible feats, it's the vision and will of those that are willing to create them that truly define their place in history. The ANT-20 story is a chapter in the larger narrative of aviation's evolution, a chapter marked by grandeur, innovation, and the ever-present shadow of human vulnerability.